The release date for Star Wars Outlaws is right around the corner, and while we've seen some gameplay for it already, we're only just scratching the surface as to just how deep this game goes.
You're looking for a way in?
I've been fortunate enough to be able to get some early, hands-on gameplay with it, and I'm excited to share not just my own experience, but also my own personal gameplay from a recent Ubisoft demo event. I'll be going through my whole demo experience, so buckle in, because you're about to see that I clearly need to buckle in as well. Also, just to set the stage for what we're looking at, we should keep a few things in mind. First off, while the game is already gold, which means it has completed core development and is ready for release, minus some patches here or there, this is still a demo build of Star Wars Outlaws, so it still isn't 100% reflective of the final game. Granted, it's still a very good reflection of what to expect and things that would and should be there. Because of how the demo event worked, I had to have a game streamed to me directly from a Ubisoft representative directly via Ubisoft Connect, while they also captured my gameplay from their side.
Hey, this is legitimate business.
Latency could have played a part in this, but it still felt very good and solid, which is a good thing for Ubisoft Connect's streaming service. I was also playing this on a controller, which was recommended for this event, so this will be my excuse for any bad gameplay, maybe less so for the amount of times I got flung off my speeder. The controls did feel fine and had no out of the ordinary surprises or presented difficulties. Other than me hitting the wrong buttons at times because I've been playing too much Elden Ring lately, but that's not a slight against the game. Controller's ultimately fine, and your optimal controls will come by whatever you're used to using. So let's start at the beginning of a demo and how the game funnels us into the more open and immersive gameplay. We're starting fairly early in the game, but not in the tutorial area. I was greeted by an intro cutscene, and surprise, we're on a big desert planet, Toshara. I was then immediately flung into combat. This is more or less a tutorial for a gameplay element that is very reminiscent of a major gunplay element from Fallout, which is the adrenaline rush shots, and you will want to use this as much as possible to make up for your main character, Kay's, lack of combat survival, especially if you're not expecting immediate combat. You could easily forego this and still choose to fight these enemies normally. The amount of cover in this fight is also pretty consistent with just about every fight we'll see in the game, so if you're struggling, at least you have the option of taking your time. After another cutscene, I was handed a new major gameplay element, the speeder, and was sent on my first real mission, which is across the desert and find the first major city on this planet, Mirogana, which is also controlled by one of several cartels or factions, and talk to their underboss. Simple, right? This opening definitely does its job of establishing where we are and conveniently having a character added to our cast of friends that has just a wellspring of information.
Lucky for you, I'm a mechanic.
The speeder is going to be your main way of traversing or exploring large planets like Toshara, but there may be some planets where this isn't used. We'll touch on this later. And getting on it displays the controls on screen to remind players, like me, how to actually drive a speeder. Shortly after leaving the ship, which I never really got to do anything with at this point, I did get ambushed by some bandits on speeders and was given on-speeder combat tutorials, which were nice. It's also good to note that from my experience, the on-speeder combat was a bit more limiting than I would have liked. But at the same time, we're playing as a character who's new to the smuggler life, so it makes sense that the combat options may be more limiting. There was the option to fight the bandits or try to outrun or outmaneuver them. I did try to fight while on the speeder, but then decided to try fighting on foot instead. This also gives us our first look at more unrestricted combat, where enemies can drop loot such as weapons, health packs, or even grenades to help you change the tide of a fight. Given that these usually drop in surplus amounts, it's always good to just use everything at your disposal. In my gameplay, I did have some random, non-bandit stormtrooper patrols come through who quickly got involved in my fight, and it definitely added an extra flair to the combat. There's a lot going on in the world, but since I was limited on what I could ultimately do, I chose to just head towards the main objective. I parked my speeder and went to enter the city. You know, it always blows my mind that in a place like this in Star Wars, you could just leave your speeder somewhere and it's never stolen. And again, this speeder is essentially your horse and only your horse. But I'll get to show you more on that later. When I try to walk in, and of course I cut the line, I'm the main character. I did have to go through an Empire checkpoint, and after a short exchange, I got to just walk right into the hub. And oh boy, Mirogana is a very true-to-source, cartel-led hive of scum and villainy. It's exactly what a remote Star Wars city should be. Lots of varying races walking around, jizz-inspired, or jats if you're in a new age mindset, music filling your ears, lots of NPCs talking. There's a lot to take in. If you're a fan of aesthetics in the Star Wars universe, you will be very pleased. The city is ultimately fairly linear with plenty of pockets of extra things both required and optional. At this point I am very clearly limited on where I can go and what I can do, but there's still a few things that we can do. There are early vendors that can be stumbled into for early looks at how some upgrade elements work, as well as some baseline gambling minigames such as racing, which is a lot more RNG at first until you find some more secrets later on. Be careful with your credits until you find a chance to out-cheat the cheater. There are also some other minigames presented in the form of arcade cabinets, which are really cool, small credit draining time killers. But there was one arcade cabinet that stood out. It was an asteroids-inspired game, but the game itself wasn't the real draw, but instead it was the music tied to it. This was such a strong Star Wars lo-fi that I was not expecting to stumble upon in a random optional arcade cabinet on the side of a street. This one piece of music goes so much harder than it has any right to, and normally I would have just ignored this gameplay piece, but in this case I was extremely happy that I discovered this. If there is this much love and strength in this one random thing that most people will just miss and avoid, what else exists in this game? Finally, I headed to the cantina that the mission was pointing me towards. There was a trooper patrol blocking another alley, as well as some other blocks and places that would prevent you from continuing your exploration. So it was high time I actually pushed further. Upon walking into the cantina, an NPC did try to offer me potential information in exchange for credits, of which I did not have any because I gambled them all away. So I had to do things the fun way, and boy were they fun. Once in the cantina proper, the Star Wars flair is just blowing up in your face. You can even interact with a jukebox to change the current song being played. There are plenty of NPCs everywhere, as well as a bartender who is more than eager to tell you information, which is that you still have to work for your objective. You can try to just walk towards where you ultimately need to go, but still get told that there's more to explore because you can't go there. At this point, I had to do some exploring in order to get to where I needed to go in order to push the game forward. For this segment, the exploration was pretty straightforward. Just entered a back room and a series of vents, and then bam, I'm in the elevator I need to be in. We are also introduced to the first of two hacking methods, your data spike. This type of hacking requires you to hit prompts on a rhythm in order to progress. This can be tricky if you struggle with rhythm, but there is a button you can hit to open a tutorial for this minigame and also enable a visual indicator accessibility option, which makes this minigame a lot more manageable. After a series of cutscenes and character interactions, we're given the factions introduction, which explains who some of the multiple cartels are on this particular planet, and explains that helping one faction will hurt your reputation with another, and will definitely change up how your game can be played. For the next section, I have to infiltrate a cartel stronghold and steal some information. This is the first real mission we get to see, and we finally get to use our adorable pet friend, Nyx, as part of the gameplay. Unfortunately, I can't just waltz into the stronghold, so I have to do some more exploring to find some back ways in, and of course, there are plenty. This is where we also get to see that exploration can pay off in great ways. There are a lot of ways to get around to different places, but there's also a lot of loot. Loot is just out and about everywhere. Sometimes it's random trinkets that you can sell for credits, and sometimes it's actual credits. Hell, you can even find materials. See some loot across the way? Send Nyx over to grab it for you and bring it back to you, so you can safely grab it. Or just walk over and grab it anyway. Speaking of materials, as I played, I did see side tasks getting completed as I completed very specific challenges, like looting crates or collecting specific materials. In this demo, there were upgrades done for your abilities menu, where once you've completed certain tasks or looted certain materials, you can upgrade things such as your health and defense. Exploring and finding as many random little loot pockets is something you will definitely want to do. Trust me, there is a lot. The video game logic of if you can go there, there's probably loot is massive. In this section, stealth was huge. You can use Nyx to distract guards, allowing you to sneak by or take them by surprise. I did a healthy mix of stealth and combat, but it's easy to see that shit can hit the fan very quickly if you leave things unchecked. Guards also aren't always the smartest, and there's plenty of examples of them being very bad at their jobs. Guards do also drop their weapons when they are knocked out or killed, and you can even have Nyx retrieve these for you, which gives you some good additional options besides just your blaster. There's a lot of climbing and traversal to do as well, and sometimes the solution to a climbing puzzle isn't too obvious. So for the folks who get offended at yellow spray paint marking where you have to go, be relieved that this is very minimal to almost non-existent in Star Wars Outlaws. You really have to learn what kind of surfaces you can and cannot climb onto. There's also some Indiana Jones inspired swinging, which can be fun or frustrating depending on your understanding of the situation you're in. You do also have to use Nyx for a healthy amount of puzzles, so it's good to just always be ready to use everything in your arsenal to push forward. After exploring and traversing, I did get put into the final little objective area, which required going around as stealthy as possible to disable some generators. This kind of went to shit real quick, but at this point, I just used the knowledge and skills that the game had imparted into me and just blitzed through the section. After making my way into the stronghold proper, I was greeted by the next computer hacking method, slicing. Slicing has you trying to find the correct sequence of either 3 or 6 different glyphs. Depending on how many glyphs you have to get the correct sequence for, you have a different amount of potential glyphs in a grid, and a different amount of chances. If you struggle with distinguishing the glyphs, there is another accessibility option in the tutorial prompt that converts them from shapes into numbers. This minigame can be very quick and easy, or very frustrating depending on your patience level. It does remove incorrect glyphs from your available grid when you input a wrong guess, so you can't guess the wrong one twice. And it will also mark if you did find a correct glyph, but had it in the wrong slot. You can also exceed the number of chances you're initially allotted if you're quick enough, so it is fairly forgiving. In this section, there's also more story-based interactions as well as some combat, leading to a big escape sequence and a platforming section that forces you to really survey your surroundings before moving forward, and plenty of little treasure piles to stumble on. Once I wrapped up here, I was spit back out to the city parking lot and got to make my way back to the cantina, where I was given my first major choice of my playthrough, which was the faction I wanted to turn the quest into. This would impact who I would gain rep with and who I would lose rep with. I went with the Crimson Dawn for now, which hurt my rep with the Pikes, and continued where I received a lot of comms about the next main things I can do in the game, as well as the ability to pick up extra quests for not just the cartel that I aligned with, but also with the Huts, another cartel. After going outside, the roadblocks that were once there were now gone. The rest of the planet was now open to me. I talked to all the NPCs in the bar that I could, grabbed quests, but also continued exploring. I did find a hidden treasure room, which there are plenty of on every world. I also found a new NPC that was asking for credits for some gambling. I gave him the credits and was told to come back later. I didn't have time in my demo to go back and see if anything progressed with them, but I imagine it may either lead to an additional side quest or potentially receive more credits. There was one other vendor I interacted with where once I left them, some stormtroopers tried to shake them down for more credits. I had the option to intervene. This was a neat additional sequence that resulted in me getting a discount from that vendor. Unfortunately, I had already purchased their entire stock, so I was kind of shit out of luck, but it was still a cool thing you could do. I did go over to the Crimson Dawn base, which I was allowed to go into. It turns out that even though I'm trusted enough to walk in, I can still fight the guards. I did have a quest to go into the base, into a side area, in order to get a component to upgrade my blaster. While I could enter the base, I couldn't go too deep in. But fortunately, with the power of exploring, I was able to sneak into the forbidden areas and even had to use Nyx for a time-based puzzle. There's also a journal here that told me who was favored to win in an upcoming race. Journals are interesting in this. They do have lore dumps in them, but also contain information that can lead you to additional quests or information for things like winning minigames or cheating in other games. Speaking of minigames, I did stumble into a Sabacc game. While it's not as interesting to me as Pazak from Knights of the Old Republic, Sabacc will definitely eat a lot of my time. You can play fairly, use Nyx to help you cheat, or unlock other power-ups to use in the actual game. For people who enjoy bullshit little in-game card games, Sabacc will be a must-play. With all my components in hand, I headed towards the next main objective, which was to head across the desert to the next spaceport where my ship was parked. I made my way back to my speeder, and upon hitting the desert was assaulted with a lot of markers for additional things to do as I drove past, including extra treasure markers or limited time activities. I did decide to check out a pirate raid on some Imperial cargo, which put me into a gunfight with both some pirates and stormtroopers. Fortunately, there was enough explosives on the ground to use to my advantage, as well as my superior gunplay that involved sitting back to heal every time I got shot. Eventually, I made my way to my ship and upgraded my blaster. The ship is essentially the personal hub where you can receive bonuses, check mail, change out your gear, and upgrade your blaster. You need specific materials to upgrade your blaster, but the upgrades do enhance you with different playstyles, such as replacing your standard blaster play for a more rapid-fire based mode, and also unlocking different functions, such as an ion mod for certain puzzles or taking out shields. After completing the main quest here, I did opt to stick around on the planet to do an additional side quest that would unlock an extra ally and also allow for additional enhancements to the speeder that were not available at the spaceport vendors. I made sure to call my speeder horse over to me and took off. This system is why I referred to the speeder like a horse earlier. As long as you're in the open world, just call that bad boy over to you. The quest involved me finding a lead, traveling across the planet, finding another lead, traveling across the planet to find the NPC in question. I'm not sure if I could have just stumbled onto this person naturally and bypassed some steps, but that would be a test for the final release of the game. This did lead me to another area across the map, which also included doing a sick jump with my speeder. This quest involved doing some platforming through an Imperial complex, and for reward was a booster for my speeder. That's pretty cool. Based on this, upgrades seem to be handled in a few different ways. There are vendors who handle your upgrades and cosmetics. It's as simple as get the materials and exchange them for something like more health on your speeder. You also have your allies, who have tasks and challenges to give you additional bonuses that you can't get through gear. Some vendors do carry gear for sale that give you some minor stat or ability upgrades while wearing them. With my demo time running out in this area, I finally decided to move forward by going back to my ship and heading into space, which is another neat transition. The controls were pretty straightforward for a Star Wars ship section. I had to go towards some cargo, but got intercepted by some bandits, which turned into a dogfight. There are a lot of systems in place to help simplify the space combat, so someone newer to dogfighting games may be able to get as much enjoyment out of this as someone who is well versed in these kinds of games. After the dogfight, you were sent to an Imperial station, but this is where my time with the section ended, and I got put into a section much later in the game. With new party members in my ear, I was now being sent on a heist to Kijimi, another planet. I did get to hyperspace jump to it, which is very well done. The hyperspace jump does mask some loading, and will give data on the planet, which I unfortunately cannot share. The scheme state that I'm being sent to does come with some slightly different gear, which is mainly for aesthetics. Kay is also very clearly more confident and knowledgeable of everything going on around her. Once off a ship and in the spaceport, I am directly in the main area for this planet. No speeder available. This is why I was saying earlier that not every planet seems to allow use of the speeder. This planet seems to be more condensed to just the spaceport for now. For my final hour of gameplay, I am introduced to the issues surrounding the Shiga clan, another cartel that seems to be exclusive to Kijimi. Right after entering the spaceport, an Imperial officer offers to reduce notoriety for credits, which sounds like a wanted system from Assassin's Creed. I didn't encounter anything with this system, but I'm sure we'll have more going on with the final release. There was still more of the same with this planet as well. I headed to the bar, got intel, did some hacking to get into a compound, found out what happens if you get caught, did some hacking to get into a compound, found out what happens if you get caught. Did some hacking to get into a compound. Focused up so I wouldn't get caught. Found a secret room, got more intel. There was also still a lot of loot to pick up around every corner and no reason to not loot it. Having new party members in my ear, I was able to use the intel to head to the final area. I'm sure there's probably a more fun way to be able to get into this area and a more straightforward option via dialogue, but ultimately, I had to find another backdoor in. I tried the stealth approach, but ultimately ended in a big blaster battle. And halfway through, I remembered about the adrenaline boost shots, which helped a lot considering the amount of enemies. After this area, I completed a quest and completed my demo time. I came into this demo really only expecting a Far Cry game with a Star Wars skin, which isn't really a bad thing since these games do enough to distinguish themselves from each other. What I got was a much more enhanced version of that, but also with some other elements seen in other games such as Assassin's Creed. The stealth play and exploration is extremely rewarding, the mini-games are very well thought out, and, well, fun. This will suffer from the same thing a lot of Ubisoft open world games do suffer from, however, where there will be a lot of repetition. But if you are a fan of a gameplay loop, that may not be a bad thing. There's going to be a lot to do on every planet, and a lot of upgrades to go for. Completionists will be able to easily put over 100 hours in this, and if you're a streamlined story gamer, then this will still be fun for you as long as these kinds of open world, thing of a map style games catch your attention. I know I'll definitely be playing this a lot when it comes out. As far as the story and setting goes, it's as Star Wars as it can get without Jedi or lightsabers. You're a nobody, just a person with no powers trying to survive and being thrust into a seedy underworld. Kay is a really fun and charismatic character that is very likable. Because it's Star Wars, things are going to be cheesy as all hell, and some writing is going to be convenient as convenience can get, with prominent figures swooping in and making sure you're taken care of, and never being able to do any wrong when it comes to other characters. But that's just the nature of these kinds of things. Definitely does mature as the game gets deeper, which is nice to see and makes me eager to see the path that this game goes. But that's it. Thanks for making it this far. I'm Cerventes, just another guy whose favorite game of all time is Knights of the Old Republic and puts way too much time into Pazak. If you want to see more of my stuff, which is normally comedy focused, consider subbing to my YouTube channel. I also stream often over at twitch.tv/Cerventes. Definitely catch me over there if you want to catch what's going on, and also see more Star Wars Outlaws when the game is officially out. Thanks for watching.